Hey folks, today I've got your full in-depth review of the new Venu Sq, the Venu Sq 2, whatever you want to call it. It essentially doubles a lot of the core or major specs of the original Venu Sq that came out about 2 years ago, basically bringing it in line with the Venu 2, Venu 2 Plus that you see right there. But there are some key differences between these two that I'll dive in throughout this review. Now the review is divided up into basically like 3.5 major chunks. The first chunk is all the newness between the Venu Sq and the Venu Sq, the original one. Then I dive into kind of the health and fitness features, from there into the sports features. After that, we'll talk about music and contactless payments, and then finally into the accuracy. So the very first thing is the price. The price for the Venu Sq is $249 for the base edition or $299 for the music edition. The music edition just has, well, music, the ability to download music onto the watch and listen to it via Bluetooth headphones. That includes from sites like Spotify and Amazon Music and Deezer without having your phone with you. There's a couple different color options you have for each of those up that you see on the screen right now. There's no differences in size. In fact, the Venu Sq and the Venu Sq are identical from an exterior case standpoint. Technically though, the Venu Sq is like 1 millimeter thinner, but we'll talk about that a little later on. Versus the Venu 2, the round watch that you have right there, has different sizes. The Venu 2 and the Venu 2S, just basically different sizes between them. Now, let's start comparing the original and the new secondary edition. Now, first up on the list is Garmin went ahead and changed from an LCD screen to an AMOLED screen. That's the same screen technology used on the Venu 2 series, and it's plenty bright, it's great, it's in sunlight, and adds more clarity. And then with that, the display size itself, the display interior there, is quite a bit bigger. So it's gone from 1.3 to 1.41 inches, which doesn't sound like much, but it's about 14% bigger between the two of them. The way they did that was just simply reducing the bezel that you see around the outside edge there. More important though is they doubled the resolution. So it went from roughly 57,600 pixels to 115,200 pixels. And you can see the resolution again on the sides right here. In terms of what you see and notice day to day, you don't notice this a ton. You notice more the larger screen size, but behind that, that allows them to pretty much mirror the entire user interface of the Venu 2 watches into the Venu Sq. So it gives them more flexibility there. Lots of more nuanced things that you'll see in the UI, but again, day to day, you're not really going to notice that resolution. And hey, just a quick note, if you're finding this video interesting or useful, it is super helpful if you whack that like button down at the bottom there. It really does help out this video and the channel quite a bit. Speaking of that doubling, they've increased the battery life from 6 days in smartwatch mode to 11 days in smartwatch mode. And then from a GPS standpoint, they've gone from 14 hours to 26 hours. And then with that, they added a new battery saver mode. So that gets you even beyond those specs for both the watch side and the GPS side by shutting off a bunch of different options, things like Bluetooth or the sensor or dimming the display, etc. So if you're tight on battery life and not near a charger, you can enable that to kind of eke out another couple of days or even many more hours of GPS usage. Now keep in mind the Venu series has both an always-on display as well as a gesture-based display, meaning the screen goes off until you raise your wrist. In the always-on display mode, it claims about 3 days. I'm getting a touch bit under that, but with GPS activities, so that seems to make sense. Next, they've added the sleep score. You can see that right there. My sleep score is 76 from yesterday with 6 hours and 7 minutes. And then down below here, you can see my sleep phases, sleep stages. And then again, the same thing kind of represented there, as well as some sort of like recommendations, if you will, of how the night went. In terms of accuracy of the sleep data, I see my sleep times is pretty much spot on correct. This was exactly the case for last night. The sleep phase is much harder to kind of like judge because even the comparative technology that you have in that area is only about 80% accurate. So you're kind of like comparing apples to pears, except both of them are probably inaccurate. So I don't really worry about sleep stages too much. I worry more about, am I getting the sleep? Am I getting, X amount of sleep each night, and kind of focus on that. Now, there are a couple new sport profiles in here, in particular the new high intensity interval training activity that you see right there. You can choose different options within this. A free one, hit timers, for example. You can see some of those there. I can also do some workouts that are built into this, a couple of them there. And you can download a bunch from Garmin Connect as well. Now, Garmin says the way they've been able to add these new HIIT activities is because of the new optical heart rate sensor on the bottom. This is Garmin's Gen 4 optical heart rate sensor. I'll put my finger over for a second and then take it off. You'll see the green light show up there. Then it brightens up to add more power to it versus the older watch had the Gen 3. The Gen 4 is used on most of Garmin's watches over the last year. You can see that here on the Venu 2 Plus. This does not have ECG in it, or at least it doesn't officially have ECG in it. We don't know for certain. Garmin has been testing ECG. I've got a whole video on it up there in the corner. They have been going through the FDA approval process, but they can't talk about that. So we have no idea like when they might announce it and for what models. And so you're kind of buying this with the assumption it does not have ECG, and then maybe down the road you'd be surprised if they enabled it. That's because ECG as a function, at least in the US as well as in the EU, is highly regulated, so companies can't talk about it until they get approval, otherwise they get in a whole crap ton of trouble. Speaking of new sensory things, inside of this is a new GPS sensor. It's the same sensor chipset provider used in the 400 255, 955, Phoenix 7, Epics, most of Garmin's new 2022 watches. And with that, you've got a new all-system satellite mode that increases the GPS accuracy. It is not, however, multi-band or dual frequency, so it's not quite as accurate as those, but to kind of spoil some of my GPS accuracy section, it's pretty darn good. Now, last but not least, as I mentioned earlier on, it is a tiny bit thinner than the original Venu Sq. However, if you've been watching some of my videos lately, you know I've dug down the rabbit hole of whether or not watch companies give the specs correctly. That started with the Samsung Watch 5 Pro, where I found it was 50% thicker than what they claimed. In the case of Garmin, they are not quite accurate there either. They are ignoring that little sensor bump that you see at the bottom. It's about 1.5 millimeters or so from their specs. Look, I don't really care what the thickness is. I just want all these companies, Garmin, Apple, Samsung, to just simply declare what the actual depth of the watch is. It's really that simple. Like every other spec out there, if they want to have an asterisk and say it's not including the sensor, that's cool too, but at least have that asterisk. Now, with that all said, let's talk about some of the hardware and how this works. First up is that this is a touchscreen device. It's also got buttons. I just hit the wrong button there to start that workout. So these two buttons right here allow you to confirm things, escape from things. So in this case, I can stop this workout that I just accidentally hit and then use that touchscreen at the top there and then go ahead and discard this particular workout. So you're kind of using a combination of those. I haven't had any problems with workouts and touchscreen and wetness on the screen. It's all pretty good here for me. Now, it's worthwhile noting I've got a full beginner's guide I'll be dropping in the next day or two on the Venu 2 Sq. I go much slower through the entire watch, through every single feature, how it works, all the nuances of that, lots of tips and tricks. So if that's not already up in the corner up there, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on that. Now, escaping on back to the main watch face, this is that watch face. It's just after midnight, so I lost all 14,000 of my steps that you can see here from the first time I filmed this video about an hour ago before I lost this entire camera file. So take 2 right here. Now, if I swipe on down, I've got all my widgets that are, again, sadly quite empty. So my steps widget right there shows me my steps from midnight. Normally I can swipe this way, but of course it's midnight, so I can't swipe anything further. Each one of these widget glances dives into deeper widgets about that particular health stat. So steps, intensity minutes for the week, calories for the day, heart rate, body battery, stress, and so on. Now again, sleep is the one that, since I haven't slept again, it'll go ahead and show me that data from last night, like I showed you earlier here. But all these other stats are basically on a per day basis up until midnight. Now for stats like steps, that's going to use the accelerometer and the gyro inside, but many of them do use that optical heart rate sensor on the back, things like respiration rate, pulse ox or blood oxygenation levels, and of course 24/7 heart rate. And all of this data is saved not just in the watch itself, but up to the Garmin Connect platform. You can see it on the Garmin Connect mobile app. You can trend this data over long periods of time or really short periods of time. Like there is no company out there from a device standpoint that has as much customization and display of data out there as Garmin does, to the point though that it becomes just so much data for a lot of people, just kind of data overload. And Garmin's done a better job of putting that on like the home screen like you see right here somewhere to kind of simplify that. But if you want to dig deep, it's certainly all there to pretty dig darn deep. Dig darn deep, dig deep darn dig. It's just there. Look, it's as simple as that. Now back on this watch face right here, this is one of the handful of stock watch faces. You can't customize these watch faces, unfortunately, on the Venu 2 series, Venu 2 Sq in particular. There's also no live watch faces like there is on the Venu 2 series. However, you can download plenty, like hundreds if not thousands of watch faces from the Garmin Connect IQ app store, and that is totally free. And then within that, you can even like create your own watch faces using photos and stuff like that. Now, before we get into the sports side of it, one particular metric that you will not see on the Venu 2 Sq that you would see on the Venu 2 is stairs. So there's no barometric altimeter in this watch, which means it's not going to count stairs as you're going up a flight of stairs, for example. I think in 2022, that should be like table stakes. I mean, after all, Fitbit has been having this on their cheap devices, like $100 devices for, I don't know, like half a decade or so now. I mean, come on, it's 2022. This is a $300 watch. It needs to have like basic stair tracking. Anything that depends on that altimeter internally, the hiking mode, for example, in sports, are not on this watch or is not on this watch. Now, if I go ahead and press the top right-hand button right there, we'll dive into the sport modes. So pressing it once, I can see here are my favorited sport modes. So run, bike, indoor, pool, swim, strength, hit. And then down at the bottom, I've got kind of sport modes that I've added but are not my favorites. So sorry, yoga, just not, and breath work. And at the very bottom, I've got all the sport modes I can choose. And I can add these to my favorites. So you can just I'm just gonna scroll through this nice and slowly so you can see all these right here. And again, most of these are pretty much identical to what you'd see on the Venu 2 Plus series. The main difference is the ones that depend on the altimeter. So for example, hike is not there. You'll also not see ascent and descent and elevation shown on the watch itself, but you will see it later on in Garmin Connect in all of your activities. Now going back to the main sport page right here, I'm going to choose run. If I swipe up, I can go into the settings. I can change my data screens. I can do this also on the phone. I've got 3 data screens I can customize. Each one of them allows up to 4 data fields. And within that, I can customize all these data fields. There's plenty to choose from here. All the core stuff that I would need is here, where you'll see the difference between this and like a Forerunner watch is things like run dynamics, training load, training recovery. None of that is on the Venu series in any way, shape, or form. You can, though, however, do structured workouts. If I go back here one more time, I just simply swipe up from the bottom, choose workouts right there, and then I can see these pre-canned ones that they've included on the watch. And then down the bottom, I've got one I've added from Garmin Connect that I created myself. So in this case, I've got some 800s and some 400s. This is my track workout the other day. And so this will iterate through that workout for you while you're out there, telling you if you're above your zone targets, below your zone targets, and then each step of that workout along the way. So once I'm ready to go, I go ahead and tap this upper right-hand button and start the workout. From there, I can swipe through the data pages to see the particular data pages that I've set up. You can see that here on the track or out on my run on the beach. I've had no problem, by the way, with the display on this in super bright midday sun conditions. This is not like your grandfather's AMOLED displays of even like 4 years ago or 5 years ago. AMOLED display technology has moved so quick over the past few years. Anyone that says that AMOLED display screens are not bright enough for the sun is not using a watch made in the last couple of years. It's as simple as that. All these watches are no problem at all in bright sunny conditions, as well as also at night. They're almost too bright in some cases at night. Now, after your workout, you'll see a summary page on the watch. You can also see all that same data up on Garmin Connect Mobile. And then if you have your account linked to Strava or Training Peaks or whatever the case may be, it'll sync to all that as well. Also, if you want to pair this watch with something like a Peloton bike, Peloton treadmill, Zwift, any of those platforms that you would normally use a Bluetooth heart rate sensor or an AMP+ heart rate sensor, you can broadcast from this watch direct to those platforms. So you don't necessarily have to go out and buy a chest strap or something else. You can just use your watch instead and pair it to those apps. Now, one important difference I want to talk about in the sport modes is some of the strength and kind of yoga workouts that are not necessarily fully there on the Venu Sq 2. You can do those workouts, but let me just show you the difference here. So I'm going to go into the sport mode. I'm going to choose strength right there. I'm going to swipe up, choose workouts. I'm going to choose total body muscle. There we go. And then these are the sets within that. If I tap one of these sets, I'll see the muscle groups that this particular workout, this particular set will focus on. And I can tap this little animation right there and see each one of those different movements and what you're supposed to be doing. This is true of, again, yoga and all the different strength components. None of this is on the Venu Sq 2. So that's something to keep in mind. I find this super useful since a lot of these different movements or different kind of activities within these sets are things that have funky names in some cases, and it's not really clear. So having these little animations is super helpful. And unfortunately, it's not something on the Venu Sq series. Now, switching topics entirely, we've got music support. So if you pay the extra $50, you've got full-blown music storage on there. So this means you have the ability to download music onto the watch, so you do not need to take your phone with you. So you can download Spotify music, Amazon Music, and Deezer Music, assuming you have those accounts, and in particular premium accounts. You can put it on your watch, and then you pair it up to Bluetooth headphones. There is no speaker on the Venu Sq 2, so even things like chirps and chimes and stuff like that on a run requires vibration alerts on the Venu 2 Sq, versus the other watches do have speakers and beepers to go ahead and make those sounds. Beyond that, though, they are identical from a feature standpoint, which gets to the next item, contactless payments. So in this case, if you have a bank that supports it, meaning that you have a bank, not just like a Visa card or something like that, but your actual bank has to support it. Garmin has a site online. You can look up every single country and every single bank supported in every single country. Even if you haven't looked in a while, just double check it in case something's changed there before you either do or don't depend on this particular feature. Now with that, let's jump over to the computer for accuracy and talk about GPS and heart rate accuracy. Okay, so starting off with a bit of a GPS test here. Not too difficult conditions, though this area right here was under the trees and whatnot, and it performed without any issues at all. The Samsung was a little bit wonky here, but the Venu 2 Square had no problems. Meanwhile, the heart rate for that run was very stable. Again, pretty much exactly the same as the test strap. Next, taking a look at one of my wife's GPS runs. This is in the forest, but it is spot on the entire time. Interestingly, she did the interval workouts, like 60-second repeats, and it's very, very close. In fact, actually outperforming her Phoenix 7S Solar Sapphire and matching the heart rate on the chest strap. Next, I went out to the track and into intervals there, and it's pretty much on the track the entire time, despite not having track mode. So kudos to them on the GPS track right here. It's pretty darn solid. Looking at the heart rate trace, only one of the intervals, the very first intervals, had a little bit of latency on the recovery, and then, of course, the pickup into that first interval. But other than that, it was spot on with the chest strap. Now, to make things really difficult, I went out for a city run back and forth up and down the downtown business district with all these really tall buildings, and it definitely struggled in here. Compared to the Forerunner 255 with multi-band, that pretty much was on the road the entire time. The Venu Sq 2 wobbled quite a bit in that middle section there, and then did some building trimming on the upper section, though it was not as bad as a Samsung, so there is something there. And then finally, here's an indoor trainer workout with some pretty high intensity, and it's virtually spot on with a chest strap, but with some latency of about 3 to 5 seconds. Okay, there you go, a complete look at the Venu 2 Square, Venu Sq 2, whatever the heck you want to call this thing. It is a very capable sports watch. I mean, certainly it has way more sport and fitness features than either their Samsung or Apple Watch counterparts. The main difference, though, is that it has less of the daily smartwatch features that you might find on an Apple Watch or a Samsung watch. So you kind of got to figure out what that trade-off is. You are going to have better battery life, though. So again, it's all about trade-offs. It's all about deciding whether you want sports and fitness features and battery life, or whether you want some of the more day-to-day smartwatch features. Still, this is a very capable watch with a ton of sport and fitness features, and especially if you don't need like the advanced training mode and structure recovery type stuff that goes on at the higher end Garmin watches like the Forerunners and the Phoenix series, this will probably fit your bill or fit the bill just fine. Speaking of things that fit, there is a ton of fitness technology stuff coming out over the next couple weeks, so definitely whack that subscribe button down there because you will not want to miss out on any of that goodness. September is going to be absolutely bonkers around here, so just stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching and have a good one.